If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This episode brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can get a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help find you options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And this week, we're going to take a look at the Orioles roster and project how some of their key players are going to perform in 2025. We're going to look at whether or not those players are going to take steps forward, stay the same, or perhaps regress a little bit. We're going to do that in two parts, starting with position players on this episode, and then later this week we will talk about the pitching staff. That is coming up on Orioles on the Verge, which is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, to NHL and UFC, BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. And as we like to do at the top of every episode, we want to welcome a couple new members of our Patreon community. And for that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, absolutely love the amount of patrons we're getting here at the start of the new year. Obviously, now's the time. We got the 25% off for the 2025 season. So if you want to sign up and you haven't, you get 25% off your first year or month when you do. But thank you so much to Peter Smith, who has signed up at the AA level, and Anthony Lupacino, who signed up at the AAA level. Guys, join the Discord. It's a lot of fun in there. Spring training is right around the corner. Hope you enjoy the content.
Absolutely, and it's a good reminder here that we are in the midst of our top 50 prospects countdown. You join in now, and not only will you be able to hear the rest of the countdown, but you'll have access to the episodes we've already done. We're about midway through the 30s now, and we have plenty more coverage coming up, not just for the top 50 countdown, but for the whole season over on Patreon. And that's at the $3, $5, and $10 level, so you'll have access to bonus coverage. Now, we'll get into the main topic of tonight's episode, which is to look at the Orioles roster and try to figure out which players are forecasted for good seasons, which ones might regress a little bit, or might take a massive step forward. And that's one thing that has sort of been lost in the narrative of the Orioles offseason, is that this is still a young team with a degree of volatility, but also a lot of promise in that there are some players who may take a big step forward in 2025. And the player we're going to start with is one who was under a lot of scrutiny down the stretch last year, and that is Adley Rutschman. Rutschman produced at a very high level in the first half of the season, but as the Orioles struggled over the second half, Rutschman's offensive production took a big dip. And there have still been questions lingering about whether or not he was fully healthy down the stretch, what issues might have played into his second half slump. But we do know that Rutschman, at his best, is arguably the best catcher in baseball, certainly the best offensive catcher in baseball, and that he adds a lot of value to the Orioles lineup. So, Nick, I will start with you. Adley Rutschman, are we going to see more of the same from him? Is he going to take another step forward? Or is the second half a sign of some looming regression?
Hopefully the second half is not a sign of things to come, but Yeah, something was definitely going on last year. We aren't going to know for sure, obviously, at this point. And if he has a strong 2025, no one's going to care anyway. I've said before as well that I just think it's going to be very hard for Adley to live up to many people's offensive expectations for like his entire career. And especially when his first 2 seasons, he was one of the top 5 offensive catchers in baseball. You combine his defense, he's quickly become one of the top overall catchers in baseball. Even with his down year last year, he was like top 15, top 20 offensively in most numbers. Projections like him to bounce back. That real emphasis there is that 2 halves, though. Like Zach mentioned, 123 WRC plus in the first half of the year, a 70 WRC plus in the second half of the year. He did walk more and strike out less in the second half of the season, but it's 229 average on balls in play. And what's league average? 300 or 330? So like about 100 points lower than league average there. I almost wonder if it was like he started to slump. It happens to every player multiple times a year, multiple times in their career. I almost wonder if he started to slump. The pressure's ramped up because expectations for this team are now like World Series or bust. The entire offense was in the gutter. Vibes aren't great. Nothing's working for anyone. At least that's what it seemed like. He's playing a lot. It's year 3. He's playing a lot behind the plate specifically. Throw in maybe some real exhaustion in there as well. And maybe it was all just too much for him to break out of. I don't know. Hopefully he learns from that. Hopefully if it's something physical, he gets his body right this offseason. He's preparing for that. Gary Sanchez hopefully is able to provide more offensive output than James McCann did, and you feel a little bit more comfortable about giving Adley more days off. Although I can't remember if it was Andy Koska when we had him on or John, whoever it was that said you give Adley a day at DH. He views that as a day off. So more DHs, whatever it is. People always quickly point to Mountcastle as the guy to bounce back because of the wall moving in, but Adley also was beaten down pretty hard by that wall. I don't see anything that points to like any massive red flags in what he did last year. So that's why I feel pretty confident that Adley bounces back in 2025 and whatever was ailing him is fixed or whatever needed corrected gets corrected. And he's right back on track next year.
I agree. I have faith that he ditches that girlfriend that got him out of shape and ruined his entire... No, I mean, the narratives people come up with is insane. But I do agree that the second half of 2024 is an aberration. Maybe he was banged up. Maybe it was a slump that combined with, bad luck, like you said, just snowballed. And that was that. Our favorite, or at least our potential new favorite projection system, Oopsie, has him rebounding for a 261 batting average, 755 OPS, which is good for a 119 WRC plus. They have him back up walking 11% of the time. I think he was down in like somewhere in the 9% for 2024. And I agree with that. I think he's a great leader and a great hard worker. I think he's certainly not satisfied with the way things went in the second half of this past season. So I expect him to come in, make adjustments, and get back on track, rolling. What is he, 26 now? So still in the prime of his career. And I think if you're going to sign him to an extension, do it now, because I think he's going to bounce back in a big way in 2025. And he might end up just getting a little more expensive after this upcoming season if he can put the first half of 2024 together for a full season, which I kind of expect him to do.
Yeah, the first half, Adley Rutschman was an interesting MVP candidate because of everything he brought to the table. But then when the production really took a dip in the second half, as the Orioles' whole offense slumped, his season ended up looking pretty, not terrible on paper, but still lower than what we're used to seeing from him. I think we're going to see 2023 level Adley Rutschman, which is still one of the best catchers in baseball, probably the best catcher in baseball. The offense is going to bounce back, and I agree with what Nick said. With the wall moving in, that is going to help him because from the data that we have from the previous dimensions, it does seem like he was hurt from the right side. And given that he's gotten a little bit better from the right side in every season in the majors so far, I could actually see the power going up a little bit this year. And speaking of the wall moving in, Ryan Mountcastle at first base and Ryan O'Hearn, we'll cover both guys at once here because for right now, it looks like the platoon that the Orioles have used for the last 2 seasons is going to be what they go with the first base, barring Kobe Mayo perhaps breaking camp with the team and getting the lion's share of playing time there. Mountcastle looks on paper to be a candidate to break out this year with the wall moving in a little bit. At the same time, though, we do know that he really stopped pulling the ball sometime a year or two ago. So he's going to have to adjust his approach a little bit to get the most out of that. Meanwhile, with O'Hearn, he has come a long way since his Kansas City days, and that has proven to be a great reclamation project on the part of the Orioles. But there are some clear limitations. For instance, we know that he really struggles with left-handed pitching. And for back-to-back seasons, we've really seen him go cold down the stretch. Though, in fairness, in 2024, I think Mountcastle's injury probably forced O'Hearn to be in some situations that the Orioles knew that he was not going to be successful in against left-handed pitching. So looking at these two players, Ryan Mountcastle and Ryan O'Hearn, do we expect an uptick in production, more of the same, or an aggregate regression between the two players?
O'Hearn, for who he is, for what his role is, I think he's fine. I don't see any real cause for like big progression. I think he could probably stay close to his, 115 to 120 WRC plus range. I guess if something does stick out with O'Hearn, it was kind of like uncharacteristic walk rate and strikeout rate. It was like a 9% walk rate, 14% strikeout rate, both very far from his career norms. So I imagine those numbers probably regress. And then is he going to be able to hit the ball more than his, what is his projected by now, like 260 something? He's going to have to hit for more than that. If so, can he do that? I don't know. If I have to pick a side, I'd probably say there's a little bit of regression there. With Mountcastle, everybody's favorite conversation. He is the obvious improvement candidate. I do need to see it first. You talk about the ground ball rate. Yeah, a lot of conversation about that as well. I was looking last night, and I assumed the home road splits would be like something drastic. But he actually pulled the ball more at home than on the road. And since the wall was moved back, actually it was 2021 to 2022. 2022 was the first year it moved in, right? So 2021 to 2022 it's no one knew, no one cares. He's still trying to be Ryan Mountcastle and just jack into left field, I'm sure. But it's like dead even. If you look, I think it's all Fangraphs where I looked it up. It's like dead even home road splits when he pulled the ball. And it's way up here. For the YouTube watchers, up top. So, and then it's just this sharp decline, and there's now this massive gap starting in 2023 between home road splits and how he's pulling the ball. I don't know what that means. I'm not smart enough to know what that means. Does it mean it just completely wrecked him? I have no idea, but that was certainly something weird. I don't know. It's still 90th percentile bat speed. And if looking at it, this isn't a should we trade him conversation. This is a here's the roster. We're going to assume he's going to play a significant amount of time. I do think he turns it around a little bit. I could see 25 home runs, I hope. And I'm saying that's as someone who I would have been cool if they traded Ryan Mountcastle for a reliever this offseason. And he's far from my favorite player on this roster. He's one of my least favorite because he's one of the most replaceable guys on this roster. But I do think I'm hoping there's more production there in that bat in 2025. Even just go out there. I don't care if you strike out 30% of the time. Just hit home runs. Just shoot for the moon every single time. You should see a better version of Ryan Mountcastle in 2025.
Yeah, we have this debate about Mountcastle in our Discord every other day. And it's like the same points being made on both sides. I lean towards Mountcastle move on now, while his value is still kind of high with 2 years of control. But like Nick said, this is not that conversation. We all know what Mountcastle is good at and what he needs to do. I think even he knows that. I think he hits the ball hard. He's a natural pure hitter. He's going to chase. He's going to swing and miss. But, man, he hits the ball hard, and he hits it regularly. And he just needs to pull the ball more often, whether the wall is 500 feet away or 300 feet away. You need to pull the ball with authority, which we know he can do. It's a matter of if he will and can consistently do it. Yeah, the oopsie projection, as Garrett is saying in the chat, 780 OPS, 122 WRC plus. They think he's going to bounce back in a big way. I would put my money on a little bit of improvement, but not like shout out Ben and Sterling, not what they would expect to see coming into 2025. I think yeah, he'll hit over 20 home runs and he'll be a little bit better, but I don't think he's going to turn into this beast. I think he's going to just be a little bit above average offense for a first baseman, and he does provide good defense. So, I mean, it's not like it's a guy we have to get rid of when we talk about trading him. At least for me, it's like there's not many places we can improve on this roster offensively when you look at just the young guys, the prospects, and where can you obviously make an upgrade in first base. Could be one of those, but Ryan O'Hearn, Oopsie has for 757 OPS, 116 WRC plus, so pretty much in line with what he's been the past couple years. It is super interesting and weird that in 2023 when he broke out with the Orioles, it was, he wasn't walking, but he was hitting the ball with more authority, and then last year it completely changed his approach. Walks went way up, strikeouts way down, made more contact, but not as much power. Hope for a happy medium. I think he's a really good strong side platoon partner for first base DH. No problem if we move on from him either, but I think he's a solid player to have on your bench for pitch hitting. So I think, both of these guys, more or less, more of the same, but maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree with O'Hearn that we're pretty much going to get more of the same, which is still good. And I made this point at the beginning of the offseason, which is that his team option for this year is good value for what he gives you, which is strong side platoon, production from first base. The walk to strikeout numbers, they might regress a little bit just because they were uncharacteristically good for him. But I think that the overall numbers are going to stay the same. And as long as the Orioles have a reliable platoon option on the other side, they can avoid putting him in the situations where the numbers tell you he's not going to be successful. With Mountcastle, I think that the approach and his health are really going to be key for this season, because I'm looking at his expected home runs by park over at Baseball Savant. And I was surprised at how low the numbers were across the board. And this is, not necessarily the best measure to figure out how he would hit in another ballpark, but it gives us some idea. The only ballparks where he would hit 20 home runs or more in a full season last year would have been Yankee Stadium, Nationals Park, and Great American Ballpark, which had him at 25, and that was the highest. So that tells you that there were more issues than the wall with Mountcastle last year. I do think that we'll see a better version of Ryan Mountcastle. What I question, though, is going to be, one, can he stay healthy? And two, does he do enough to fend off Kobe Mayo? Because if the Orioles believe that Mayo can give them more power, and I think that Mayo's raw power grades out much better than Mountcastle's, they might make that switch at some point during the season. But if they can get Mountcastle to a point where he's hitting 20 to 25 homers, which I think was a full healthy season he can do, that's going to help his value.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
We'll go now to second base, and another kind of platoon situation here. We're leaving off Jorge Mateo from this discussion just because we don't know exactly what his health is going to be at the beginning of the year. So we're going to look instead at Jackson Holliday and Ramon Urias. Urias last year played most of the season with a lot of fans, ourselves included, saying at some point he's got to be DFA'd. Then all of a sudden the production picked up in the second half. And when Jordan Westburg went down with his injury, Urias actually really stepped up and played well. Unfortunately, he had an injury himself just about the beginning of the final month of the season that cost him some time. But overall, Urias was able to get back to typical career level of production for him by the end of the season. Holliday, meanwhile, struggled in his first tour through the major leagues, was sent back to Norfolk and came back up in late July and performed a little bit better. And there is some hope that maybe the late season adjustment going with the toe tap in his setup from the batting stance is going to help him going forward. But the projections right now for Holiday across the board, probably looking about a 250 batting average with a 700 plus OPS. So I think we would agree there's another gear to Jackson Holiday, as we talked about last week, but we don't know exactly how much we're going to see in 2025. And with Arias, are we looking at more of the same, or is there going to be maybe a good season or maybe a little bit of regression?
I would say I agree with Garrett in the chat that Urias is a great bench bat and someone to have in case of an injury because he can play third base, second base pretty adequately. And when he gets regular playing time is when he plays his best. And that's why I think he's going to be a regression candidate this year. Nothing crazy, but he's not going to get the at-bats, hopefully, if things go according to plan. He's not going to get the amount of at-bats that he got last year or even close with Westberg and Holiday, hopefully continuing for Westberg and a breakout for Holiday, which I will predict in a second. But Arias, I think you'll see closer to a 700 than a 750 OPS when the season's over, but still a really nice player to have. If a team comes calling and wants him for everyday at-bats, sure. But in the meantime, yeah, I think he's kind of underrated in the fan base, and he's a solid bench player. Just think he's going to not do quite as well in 2025 based on playing time. And speaking of Holiday, just shout out to Rates and Barrels, who did some homework for me with what I'm about to say. But in the second half, Jackson Holiday had the fourth highest hard hit percentage in baseball. Or was it the American League? I think it might have been the American League. But he was hitting the ball very hard, very often. Nothing to show for it, basically, at the end of the day. But we know, and that was what Eno's point, and then Derek Van Riper said, you're not going to tell me that for the 2 years that Jackson Holiday's been in professional baseball, that all the reports of his hit tool and everything at 20 years old, that they're all false and worth nothing at this point when he just turned 21. So I think we're going to see a huge breakout. Even Oopsie projects him to a 710 OPS, 109 WRC plus. I think that's low. I think he's going to break out in a big way this year. Obviously not Rookie of the Year eligible anymore, but I think he's going to have a Rookie of the Year type of season if he was eligible. And yeah, that toe tap is in, and he's going to toe tap his way to 750 plus OPS, 15 homers, 15 steals, great defense at second base.
Yeah, Holiday's the one. We just talked about him last week, so I don't really have anything new to add. Just the same exact thing I said last week. It's that hard hit rate. It was 45%, which is 10% above league average. You look at the rolling average launch angle, it's up and up and up. It's a nice, pretty chart as the season progressed. So he hits the ball incredibly hard, and he started hitting the ball in the air more as when he came back up in his second stint in the major leagues. And he proved for a week there that he could absolutely mash major league pitching. His dad's an unbelievable resource. He was a top prospect in baseball for many reasons. He just turned 21 a month ago. The kid's going to be okay. I think that's one where, because he's so young, but also because we know the adjustments he made, I think I'm okay with kind of bucking the projections a little bit here with Holiday. And yeah, same thing, feeling confident that, maybe he doesn't hit for the highest average. Maybe there's still, when we're talking about Holiday at the end of 2025 season, we're still talking about a lot of growth and a lot of development that still needs to happen. But I just think that power is going to start to shine through this year. And Ramon Arias, yeah, it's, you always see guys, especially like, broadcasters, beat writers, you see Orioles folks on the inside really start to they know the pulse of the fan base. They know who's talking about what. And it's always like when we're bashing a guy, it always seems, there's extra emphasis in the broadcast to be like, man, look at all the great things this guy is doing. And there was a lot of that with Ramon Arias at the end of the year, I remember specifically. And that was the one time though, where I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, we have been a little too rough on Ramon Arias because it's a 115 WRC plus in 100 games. Highest walk rate of his career, lowest strikeout rate of his career by a wide margin. He was fantastic for what his role was last year. But yeah, I agree with Bob there that ideally we don't see a lot of him in 2025 because I don't like the idea of Westberg being like a bounce around guy, like playing more second base, third base, like moving him around. I really like being able to keep him at third base. I really love, though, Kobe Mayo coming in there and taking over first base reps. And I lost the point that I was trying to make there. Regardless, I agree with Bob that I don't think we're going to see Ramon Urias. Hopefully he doesn't get as many at-bats or opportunities this year. And yeah, you're not going to be able to get much for him in a trade, but he's going to provide value for some organization out there. We said this again last year, but maybe it comes true again this year. We'll see what injuries happen in spring training. You see what teams don't get to fill the holes that they were hoping to fill this offseason, and maybe someone does step up and offer for Ramon Urias after seeing what he did last year. And best of luck to him if he does get shipped off. But if he's still on this roster next year, yeah, there are very few options out there. I think that I would take over Ramon Urias for that role.
Yeah, for Holiday, I think we're going to see a step forward for all the reasons that you guys said. And the projections, although I would be happy if he finished with that kind of season, they are on the low end of what I think his ceiling is for 2025. And with Urias, I think that there's probably going to be 2 months of solid playing time there.
Yeah, okay. So that's like...
Okay. He froze.
I didn't know if he had more to go on that point, but yeah, I think especially early on, he'll probably play second base against lefties until Holiday really just gets his groove on. That's a weird thing to say in 2025, but until Holiday really just warms up and becomes the player we all expect him to be, I could see Urias playing either second or third base, depending on what they want to do with Westberg against lefties, while Holiday is on the bench until a right-handed pitcher comes in, and hopefully Zach is back.
Back now, yeah. So, as I was saying with Urias, it's going to be a couple of months of steady playing time, but if Holiday shows that he's taking the next steps forward that you want him to take, and then he can handle Major League pitching on a daily basis, his playing time, Urias' playing time, is going to scale back a little bit. But I expect that the final numbers for him, regardless of what the sample size looks like, are going to be about the same. He might regress a little bit in strikeout rate just because that was so much lower than what we're used to seeing from him. But I think in just about every other area, we're going to see similar production. We'll go now to third base. Jordan Westberg, all-star last year, and his injury might have sent the Orioles season going in the wrong direction in late July, because while Westberg does have some flaws when you really dig deep into the data, mainly a low walk rate, he was giving the Orioles pretty consistent production, showing more power than we had seen from him at any point during his short Major League career, and providing solid defense at third base to go with that. Now, with a player like that who had an all-star season I don't think a lot of people saw coming, you could go one of two ways, it feels like. You could either say that was just the beginning, there's another gear to Westberg, and he's going to take a big step forward this year, or he's going to regress a little bit. The bottom's not going to drop off, but the numbers across the board aren't going to really jump up the way you think they might. It's also possible he holds steady, but I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on Westberg. Do we see another gear to Westberg, or is there some regression coming?
I think there's personally some regression coming, and that's not good. Means I think that Westberg's not going to have a good season. I just think he pretty much blew away my expectations, and even though his numbers kind of came down towards the end in the second half, like he had 18 home runs in only 107 games, 26 doubles, 5 triples, 792 OPS, almost a 500 slugging percentage. I did not see that coming, especially when he had a 4.9% walk rate. I just think, I don't know if he's going to make that kind of quality of contact again, but I think he is the glue guy on this offense, and I think he's a huge reason why the offense really stuttered down the stretch and struggled. So, yeah, I think he's going to have closer to a 750 OPS than a 790 or 800. So I think he'll be like the new Ramon Urias, except everyone will love him because he was a prospect, a big-time prospect with the Orioles coming up, and he's younger, and I think there's definitely room for improvement. I just think he kind of hit like his 90th percentile outcome last year, and maybe he'll be closer to his 50th percentile in 2025.
Yeah, I think largely his when you look at his profile, it's largely going to stay the same. Yeah, I don't think there's too much more of a ceiling there with Westberg either. I don't know. I think maybe you stretch his numbers out across a full healthy season, new wall dimensions, year 2, year 3 growth. Can he get 25 home runs this year? I'm gonna say Jordan Westbrook gets 25 home runs this year. Maybe you see a few more walks. That would be nice. But I don't know. Maybe he's going to make some adjustments as well in the way he attacks pitchers, because obviously year 2 pitchers are going to change the way they attack Westbrook next year. So how is he going to respond? And that could cause a few changes in his game. But yeah, he seems just like this is who he is, which is perfectly fine. He's shown that he can be an all-star. He can probably get another all-star game in his career at this rate. I don't know. The power was something that you go back to when he was drafted, and there's questions about, is there going to be power in that bat so he can like take that next leap and become a star at the next level. And he quickly showed that that power is there in that bat. That's what's really impressed me so far throughout his career. He was a lot more consistent. That was the big thing. I think all three of us were kind of anticipating when he got caught up to the major leagues, those long slumps, probably even more strikeouts at the major league level, but he was better than advertised. And so I think a full year without the injury, I'm going to say Jordan Westbrook gets 25 home runs. Maybe the counting stats improve, but overall his profile is going to pretty much remain the same, I think, throughout his career.
Yeah, I think I kind of fall along Nick's line of thinking here, which is that the counting stats are going to improve because he's going to have a full healthy season, but the profile is going to look the same. The thing that for me is the big key with Westberg is the walk rate, because I don't know how sustainable his success is going to be if he's posting a 4.5-5% walk rate. But if he can kind of take what we saw from Anthony Santander during his final few seasons with the Orioles, where he's not going to walk 10% of the time. But if that walk rate can live in the 7 to 8% range, everything else is going to fall into place. You're going to be able to live with that. That's kind of where I want to see Westberg get this year. Is you don't have to walk 10% of the time, but you get the walk rate up to 6.5%. I'll consider that a success. And then take his numbers from last year, put them out over a full season, factor in the wall moving it. I think 25 home runs with a 110, 115 WRC plus is entirely in the realm of possibility for him.
Yeah, Oopsie has him as 113.
They got, like you mentioned, Santander to walk a little bit more. Ryan Mountcastle was not walking at his rate that he has in the major leagues when he was in the minor leagues. So they got Ryan Mountcastle to do it more once he got to the big leagues. I could see them doing the same with Westberg. Westberg seems like a pretty cerebral guy, pretty smart guy. I could definitely see him making the necessary adjustments he needs to make, knowing that his ceiling probably isn't what Cowser's is. It isn't what Gunner's is, obviously. It isn't what some of his peers is. He's got to work a little bit harder. So maybe, a little adjustment here, a little adjustment there. If you can get that walk rate up to 6-7%, that could make a world of difference in his offensive output. So he made me a massive fan. That's all I'm going to say about Jordan Westberg. Like, not that I wasn't a fan of when he was coming up. Obviously, we were Joey Ortiz guys, but we were never anti-Jordan Westberg. But man, yeah, it's hard to imagine this Orioles lineup without Westberg in it.
Yeah, and to argue against myself for a second, it was clearly intentional, the lower walk rate last year, because I think the team noticed that he has a little bit more swing and miss in his game. So if a pitch is in his zone, he's going to swing early and swing often, because when he makes contact, he makes impact with the ball. And you saw that with the doubles and the home runs and even 5 triples in not a full season last year. So I'm sure he'll make adjustments like Nick said. And yeah, he'll probably be closer to 6 or 7% walk rate and be a little more well-rounded. And he's only going to get better. He's still only, 25, 24. So yeah, I'm still a fan as well, but got to regress some of these guys,
Let's round out the infield here with Gunnar Henderson, who had a remarkable year last year, putting up 37 home runs in 159 games to go with an 893 OPS and a 155 WRC plus. He was worth 8 F4 and finished 4th in MVP voting. He also earned his first All-Star appearance. Now, I think we know how good Gunnar Henderson can be. And last year was an example of that. But can he be even better?
Yeah, I'm not regressing Gunnar Henderson. And which I think is fair. It's kind of hard. You're gonna have to like nitpick some of these guys. I feel like. Well, I do have one coming up that I feel pretty confident he's going to regress. But I mean, a lot of projections have this Orioles offense projecting to be one of, if not the top offense in baseball in 2025. So Gunnar, though, it's like, yeah, this is Gunnar. Gunnar still has a ceiling yet to reach, and it probably won't be this year, but the rumblings are going to start. They should. As long as Gunnar continues on this path, when people talk about the legends of today's game, Ohtani, Judge, Soto, Gunnar's name is going to be in that conversation. Like, you saw more walks and fewer strikeouts last year. It's like 50th percentile whiff and strikeout rate. Maybe he can continue to improve on that a bit. He did take that massive slide July and August. August in particular he was a league average bat, like just a smidge above league average. Barely a 300 on base percentage. It wasn't good. But I think Gunnar reaches his next gear with more experience. Like it's only been 2 seasons. That's it. It feels like he's been playing in this lineup a lot longer, but he only has 2 seasons under his belt. More games, more at bats. He's going to continue to develop that veteran knowledge, that veteran mentality. He's going to continue to get more comfortable in the field as well and progress there. He's the shortstop of this team. He knows that now. I have all the confidence in the world. He's also still an extremely young player that he can progress in the field. I don't see why he can't be a 40-plus home run guy, 9-10 WAR season. He had 37 home runs and it was worth 8 WAR last year. So I'm buying an even bigger 2025 with Gunnar Henderson.
Completely agree. I think bare minimum, he's the same type of player, like around 900 OPS with great defense. He also slumped with the glove around that same time as he slumped with the bat last year. So hopefully he can, find a way to limit those in the future. But again, shout out to Rates and Barrels, who Eno Saris said that he thinks Gunnar's, and he was talking about fantasy, but I think it applies to baseball in general as well. He's a top 2 or 3 player in the game right now. And he's 23 years old, 23. So I think players don't really hit their peak until 26, 27. So yeah, he's still getting better. I think he's an easy 35-plus homer guy, which is crazy to say, but he hits the ball hard. He has great bat speed, and that's a recipe for home runs. Yeah, and I think don't underestimate the wall coming in left field, helping him out, and helping guys like Kowser, Kerstad, even Holiday. These guys can go opposite field with some power, and bringing that wall down in height and closer in, obviously, I think if you thought we hit a lot of home runs last season, just wait till 2025. And Gunnar Henderson, yeah, I'm thinking maybe MVP of all baseball in 2025.
That is an interesting. I want to look that now because my mind instantly just went to when he was in Delmarva and those opposite field home runs he's hitting down in Delmarva when he first got his career started. I'm interested to see. Look at his spray chart from last year. I have not looked at that. How often did he go opposite way, and how often was he robbed from that wall last year? That's a good point too.
Yeah, looking at his baseball savant right now, I think that I'm seeing at least 5 home runs that went out to left field last year. You throw in a couple more to left center and center, so he can go the other way. I think the 2 traits that Gunnar has that have always been overlooked are his ability to hit the ball the other way and his speed. I think that he will have a 30-30 season. He was 21 for 25 in stolen base attempts last year. 39, or he had over 30 homers. I think that he's going to have a 30-30 season, maybe even with 40 home runs. And I agree with Bob. There is an MVP level performance in Gunnar Henderson this year. And I'll just go ahead and predict this now. If the Orioles win the American League East, Gunnar Henderson will win American League MVP. Because the narrative will all be in place. We know that they're not going to win the division if Gunnar doesn't go out and produce at least at a level that he had last year. But if there is another gear there, and the lineup looks as good as the projection systems have them right now, the East is in play. And at that point, I think Gunnar Henderson wins American League MVP.
He's also he's also just a lot of times you see he's like too aggressive. and like to his detriment. And it's like he's trying to stretch that single into a double. He's trying to stretch the double into a triple. It's like little things like that where like, yes, keep being aggressive. I don't want to rein him in at all, but it's smarter decisions, I think. And that just comes with time because we're still talking about so many young players on this team, just their second years, their third years. And so with Gunnar, like I said, with Gunnar, I think a lot of that does get reined in, which adds to his game, helps take his game to that next level. When a few of those kind of rookie young mistakes get cleaned up a bit as he learns opponents more, he knows exactly who he can run and who he can't run against and who he can challenge. It just comes with time, and he's getting there.
Yeah, I think the area that you're going to see him continue to improve over the next, not just next year, but going forward, just get better and better at is laying off the pitches he can't do anything with. I think you saw the walk rate go up a lot in 2024. I think it's just going to, as pitchers are more and more scared to throw him in the zone, I think he's going to learn to lay off pitches out of the zone more. He's going to walk more, be more selective, and when he does swing, he's going to do more damage.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
We'll wrap up the position player portion of this discussion with the outfield, and we'll start with Colton Cowser, who finished second American League Rookie of the Year voting by putting together a fine rookie season. It was sort of a peaks and valleys type performance. He got off to a hot start, cooled down for a couple of months, and then kind of kicked it up a little bit at the end of the season. If you take out that prolonged slump that he had over the first half into the second half, he probably ends up winning Rookie of the Year. But that's a separate discussion for another day that we've kind of already kicked around. How much better can Colton Cowser get this year, or are there maybe some signs of regression here?
Better. Extend this man immediately, because I think he's low-key. If Jordan Westberg's the glue guy and Gunnar's the MVP and Adley's like the leader, I think Cowser is like, I don't know, the Scottie Pippen, I guess, of if you want to do this comparison. Like, I think he's going to be a huge, huge piece of this Orioles franchise going forward. I think he's amazing in the clubhouse. Everybody loves him. He's a great player. He's got great defense, can play left, center, right. He's got a great arm. He has more power than Heston Kjerstad, raw power. I think that goes untalked about, not enough. I think he's only 24, will be 25 by the time the season starts. I think he's still getting better. I think with Cedric Mullins being in his final year under contract, and we don't know who, if any, of the Enrique Bradfield, Vance Honeycutt, Judd Fabian, et cetera, you can plug him in at center field if you need to. And if one of those guys comes up and hits and becomes the players we think they could be, he can go to left field, right field. I think he's got a 30-homer season in him. Maybe not this year coming up, but I think he's got multiple 30-home seasons in his career. And I think the narrative around him, it's like so weird, because you got the milkman sections, like the huge Cowser fans, and then you got the guys who think he's so overrated because he strikes out a lot. But he's a 5-tool player, and I think we've only seen the worst of him so far, and I think he's just going to continue to get better. So I'm big up on Cowser.
I mean, he's been a polarizing player from the moment he was drafted. And that's just not even among Orioles fans. That's among the national media and people who follow the draft. They didn't like the pick. People hated him when he was at Aberdeen. We've gone on the rants before. People hated him when he first came up to the major leagues because they thought he sucked. And now he finished second place in Rookie of the Year voting. He does have a lot of holes and glaring issues, but to see his growth last season, I think he deserves way more credit than what most are willing to give him. Yeah, the numbers with running and scoring position weren't good. He hit fastballs extremely well and started seeing fewer of them as the year progressed because teams figured out, hey, he can really hit the fastball. Let's stop throwing it to him. And on breaking balls and off-speed pitches, he had a 40+% whiff rate on both types of pitches. And I think especially I think it was the breaking balls where his actual results far exceeded his expected numbers on breaking balls. So like that could be a sign where if he doesn't improve there, then in some aspect of his game, yeah, you could maybe see a little bit of regression. But I just look at the wins he had last year, 24 home runs. There's more in the tank, like Bob said. He hits fastball as well. He proved to everyone he can play center field, 96 percentile in outs above average, 96 percentile in arm strength. I'm excited to see what year 2 brings. Like, can he maintain that growth from last year while also improving in other areas of his game that drastically need to be improved? And that's kind of scary when we can sit here and pick out a couple of things with Cowser that are big holes that drastically need to be fixed. Yet you see what type of player he was in year 1. That's fun. It's exciting to dream on what he can become. Like I think based on the growth and development he showed last year as a whole, I think it's fair to be pretty optimistic about what he could show in 2025.
Yeah, I think that he does take a step forward this year. The key thing is going to be preventing the prolonged slump that he had last year. And players are going to go through slumps. There's no getting around that. But I think you want to see the worst not be as bad and not last as long, because that's really going to be a big thing for him. And the other one is he just has to get better on the off-speed pitches, like Nick said. In particular, the changeup was a pitch that he really struggled with last year. But keep in mind that this is a guy who has been tested every point in his career and has managed to always find a way to get better. So I could see batting average goes up maybe 10, 15 points, which I know for some people still isn't going to be enough, but it's going to be pretty good. Comparable WRC plus, so around 120 with maybe closer to 30 home runs. Maybe he doesn't get to 30 this year, but I agree with Bob. The raw power is there for him to have a 30-homer season at some point in his career, and he's in the right ballpark to do it. So it might not happen in 2025, but I think he at least takes a step towards that. Let's go over to center field now. Cedric Mullins, now the longest tenured Oriole, entering a contract year. Mullins was pretty bad at the plate for most of 2024, but then started to pick things up over the final months of the season, and actually was one of the few Orioles to hit well in the postseason. We know who Cedric Mullins is as a hitter at this point. Very streaky, struggles against lefties, might strike out a little bit more than you would like, but when he's locked in, he's going to make good, hard contact, especially against right-handed pitching, and he provides a lot of value with his speed and his defense. What do we see from Cedric Mullins in his contract here? Do we see an Anthony Santander type of situation where he puts together great numbers? Or do some of the worrying signs from 2024, which we'll get into in this discussion, point to a step backwards for him?
The problem is he can't hit lefties like at all. So he's basically a platoon, strong side platoon given, and I think the last 3 years he's had a 108, 99, 105 WRC plus. So he's going to be like an average to slightly above average bat. I think he stays around that. And while I've argued in the Discord that that's a reason to upgrade on Mountcastle, but that's at first base. This is a center fielder with great Gold Glove caliber defense, can come in late in games as a defensive replacement, pinch runner if you're facing a righty. So I think he stays roughly about the same. I think maybe slight regression just to a flat 100 WRC plus. But yeah, I think it's his final year as an Oriole. I don't know if he's going to, I'm hoping he has an amazing season enough to justify offering him the qualifying offer and then maybe you bring him back on that for one more year, or you get a draft pick like the Orioles just did with Anthony Santander, Toronto Blue Jay, for the next 5 or 6 years. Sad. But yeah, I think Mullins is about the same to slight regression.
I will preface this by saying I have a ton of respect for Cedric Mullins, and go back to his college days. He wasn't supposed to have this type of career. You go back to, remember, he made his major league debut and then gets sent back to AAA. He goes back to AA. We talked about this a lot. The body language was some of the worst I'd ever seen. Watching him when he was down there back in Bowie, to see him climb his way back up and have a 30-30 season was unbelievable. And he did have a bit of a bounce back in 2024, but I think he regresses pretty hard this year. This is going to be my pick for regression here. He was like bottom 20% of the league in most categories. He's now 30, which isn't a death blow, but it's when you need to start paying attention more to the marks of decline. He's bottom third of the league in bat speed. I don't know what his 2023 number was, but 2024, it was not good. The max EV was way down last year. The hard hit percentage was way down last year. Bob talked about the lefties. A 506 OPS against lefties is atrocious. I do think this is it for him in Baltimore. The speed and defense are going to keep him in the lineup. They're going to keep him. He's going to be a valuable player to this roster in 2024. But I just don't see anything that stands out to me as like continued progression from last year. Maybe he can, if all goes well, and he does stay the same offensively and keeps giving you the speed and defense. Fantastic. Unbelievable. That's what I hope happens. But if I've got to pick a guy that's going to like regress, I think Cedric Mullins is my pick here.
I agree, unfortunately. When I look at the underlying factors behind his performance last year, I don't think it's a fluke that he really didn't hit for most of the season. I think there are some really worrying signs here. His speed and his defense will keep him in the lineup, and it will give him a roster spot for the full season. But when I look at how slow the bat speed is, and to your point, Bob, he cannot hit lefties at all. And when he gets into a slump, that issue becomes even more glaring. And it's kind of why I think that the Orioles outfield situation might not be entirely settled, because I do think they're going to need another right-handed bat to supplement that issue, because we know that Mullins can't hit left-handed pitching, and it's going to be a problem for him this year. The best case scenario, I think, for Mullins is maybe something close to what he did in 2023. Which will give him a nice little boost going into free agency. But yeah, I agree. I just think the bat it's hard across the board to be much worse than Mullins was last year, but I don't see him getting better. And I think that production is going to look similar to how it did last year.
No, that's why, you mentioned the outfield situation maybe not being settled. I think that's why the Orioles, other than Michael Elias's infatuation with Daz Cameron, I don't know what's going on there with that relationship, but they are pretty tight, it seems like. But you look at the numbers, and I think this was what kicked off the Substack, the weekly articles up on Substack. I don't know why, but this is what triggered me wanting to write again. Here we are, Daz Cameron against lefties, 253 average, 337 on base percentage, 817 OPS. And that was in pretty 75 at-bats, I think that is. Yeah, 75 at-bats with Oakland at the major league level last year. Those aren't his numbers in Norfolk. Like, he's got speed. He plays all three positions as well. Hopefully, he's got to show it in spring training, but I do wonder if somehow Daz Cameron does make this roster.
Let's go over to right field now. This will be where we'll wrap up the position player segment. Tyler O'Neill and Heston Kjerstad. O'Neill, the big free agent signing in the Orioles offseason so far, coming off a nice rebound with the Boston Red Sox. Now, there were some things in there that were a little bit concerning, such as the fact that he struggled against right-handed pitching and that his defense took a step back from the Gold Glove level that it had been during his time in St. Louis, but nonetheless worthy of the contract that he got from the Orioles. And there's reason to believe that he could be the right-handed bat that this lineup is really missing. And with Heston Kjerstad, I should preface this by saying that when it comes to major league production, we can't really view it in terms of regression or progression, because we still have not seen a lot of Heston Kjerstad. at the major league level. But we know from his time in the minor leagues what kind of player he is. He's got tremendous raw power, probably an average to slightly below average defender. Strikeout rate might be a little bit high, but he'll generally post a decent walk rate to go with that. And while the pull side power is the loudest tool, he does have solid back control and can take the ball the other way when he needs to. So Tyler O'Neill and Heston Kjerstad. Do we think that there's another gear to these two players? Do we expect the same from O'Neill, or do we expect both to regress?
I personally think, and I don't think they're going to be strictly a platoon. I think both will be in the lineup plenty as the year goes on. But for right field, for moving on from Santander to a combination of O'Neill and Kjerstad, I think they're going to at least match Santander's production, if not outperform it. And obviously, Santander was amazing last season, hitting 44 home runs, but this is kind of a compliment to Colton Cowser as well. Oopsie predicts Gunnar Henderson #1 WRC plus in the lineup at 151, and then Colton Cowser and Tyler O'Neill tied for second with 123 WRC pluses, and they're kind of similar players where they're going to strike out around 30% of the time, going to take their walks, but they're going to hit for power, especially O'Neill. If he can stay healthy, I think he's a 30-homer guy, especially with the new dimensions in left field, which will get talked about plenty. So I love the Tyler O'Neill signing, especially when they signed him early on in the offseason. I think it's looking more and more like a deal as you see all the prices in free agency play out. I think they got a really good deal with him, and I'm excited to see what he can do. And then Kjerstad, yeah, as long as he's healthy, I mean, he'll be 26, so he's in his prime right now. I think if he gets 450 to 500 at bats, I think Orioles fans will be content with what he will give you. And maybe if, I don't know, I could see a scenario where at the trade deadline, Kjerstad again is dangled for a star top of the rotation arm. If like Dylan Beavers, Judd Fabian are breaking out, who knows? But for the time being, I'm a fan of this combination here for right field / DH.
Yeah. Scrolling through Twitter and just saw a former Orioles minor league coach. Why hitters should toe tap? Going back to Jackson Holiday for a second. There we go. Kjerstad and O'Neill. I love the O'Neill signing. He only has 2 healthy seasons, but it was 143 WRC plus, 131 WRC plus in those 2 healthy seasons. 131 WRC plus last year when he was with Boston. I really, really love the Tyler O'Neill signing, but my deal is with Kjerstad. I just have no idea anymore with Kjerstad. I'm kind of done making predictions about his playing time. I'm done trying to guess anything with Heston Kjerstad here because we know he has literally nothing left to prove in the minors. I thought sending him back to AAA last year and having Stowers come up was actually a sign of we aren't bringing Santander back. I think that's become even more clear that they knew early last year that Santander was not coming back. Kjerstad's going to be the guy, but right now we can't get him regular at bats. We need someone to be a part-time player, sit on the bench. Kyle Stowers can do that because that's who Kyle Stowers is in the major leagues. It's better to give Kjerstad those everyday at-bats down in AAA. Then those at-bats came, that regular playing time came, so we could finally see Kjerstad for an extended run, and Clay Holmes had to ruin that. Hopefully your career falls apart on the other side of New York now. I just want to know, like, now, going into 2025, it's like, okay, Kjerstad is going to be that guy, but then they signed Tyler O'Neill. And I do like this kind of pairing as well, but like O'Neill was signed to play for the majority of the time. How are you going to fit all these pieces together? Clearly the Orioles have a plan for doing that, but like if Adley sees more time at DH, if Gary Sanchez is hitting well and they can afford Adley more DH time, you've got Mountcastle, you've got O'Hearn, you've got Kjerstad, you don't really want him playing first base. It would make things a little bit easier maybe, but we don't want him playing first base. I just want to know like what the plan is with Kjerstad. Like there's still this jam. How much is he going to play? Like they also, it also feels like in these limited run he's gotten, they want to shield him from lefties, but he hit 273 with a 764 OPS against lefties in AAA last year. Year before that, he OPS'd 880 against lefties in the minors. They kind of want to shield him as well, playing in the outfield, it seems like, but he grades out like fine defensively in right field. You don't want him in left field, even with the wall coming in a little bit more. I just want to know what the plan is. I'm at a loss. Like, this isn't Kyle Stowers 2.0. I truly think Kjerstad can be a solid everyday major leaguer. I just don't know if it's going to be in Baltimore or not this year, or what exactly their plan is with him this year. Because I do agree, like, when he's gotten that time, when he's gotten the run, he's shown that he can be productive. He's going to strike out a little bit more than you want, but he doesn't have the super high-end max EVs, but as you know, called him all last year, the barrel king. That's what he does. He barrels baseballs, and he's going to find his way to 25-plus home runs across the full season. I don't know. I'm in wait-and-see mode here with Kjerstad.
I'll start with O'Neill. I actually think that there's going to be a little bit of progression. I think we're going to see a little bit better version of Tyler O'Neill this year compared to the player that we saw in 2024. He's talked about how getting out of Fenway Park and coming to Camden Yards is going to allow him to do some different things at the plate, because last year he had a very pull-heavy approach because that's what it called for playing at Fenway Park. But he does have some opposite field power that I think he'll be able to tap into now. So I think you're going to see a more well-rounded offensive player with a lower strikeout rate. And I actually think the defense will get back up a little bit. It's not going to be at that Gold Glove level, but you move him into right field at Camden Yards. You have him coming off a full healthy season, presumably a normal offseason program. And I think that he probably grades out as a slightly above average right fielder next year with a plus arm. So I think O'Neill's overall value this season is going to be higher than it was in 2024 when he was still pretty good, 2.5 F4. I think that number goes up a little bit. Kjerstad, I feel like we're going to see progression, but not enough to answer some of the questions that Nick covered. I know that there are some people who look at Kjerstad and believe that there's maybe a Kyle Schwarber type player in there. There are others who maybe think he's not going to be much more than a platoon guy or an up and down guy. And I just have this sense that maybe because he'll be slow played a little bit early in the year, or he's going to lose at bats to O'Neill and possibly Mountcastle or Hearn and Mayo as we get further into the year, that he's not going to get a ton of playing time. So what we're going to see from him over, let's say 300 plate appearances is not going to be, 300 to 400 plate appearances, somewhere in there, is not going to be enough for us to come away and say, okay, Heston Kjerstad is the Orioles' everyday right fielder for the next 5 years, or they better trade him now before the value gets worse. I just feel like we're not going to have a satisfying answer to those questions. And with that does it for the look at position players. We're going to forecast the Orioles pitching staff, including the rotation and the bullpen, later on this week. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 level to have access to our top 50 prospects countdown, which is currently underway, and for bonus coverage throughout the season. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network.
Hello, my name is Jorge Gaviria, and I'm the founder of Hacienda. We partner with farmers in Mexico to bring heirloom corn products to every kitchen. With my Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One, I earn unlimited 2% cash back on every purchase. And it has no preset spending limit, which means my purchasing power adapts to my business needs. My Spark card helps me fulfill my mission of bringing masa to the masses. Capital One, what's in your wallet?
Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/SparkCashPlus.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.